So I'll just quickly run through a little bit about Aarki. As Jeet mentioned, we are a mobile DSP. We are 100% programmatic and plugged into all the major exchanges. I think our biggest differentiator, which Harry will talk to quite a bit today, and we'll keep this going quickly, is our creative differentiation. So we do creative optimization, dynamic creative optimization, and we let the data help inform which creative we do serve to that user. A little bit about the bid stream. Some of this you all may know, but there's some basic stuff that comes through the bid stream, right? The age, the gender, maybe location data, what apps are on the phone, a little bit about that user's behavior. And what we do is we add to that, like many programmatic partners do, we add to that our machine learning, which really, if you break that down, I hate that term, AI, ML, it's really, it's really building predictive models and saying, is that an impression I want to bid on? Do I want to bid on that impression because that user has had a certain behavior in the past? So we definitely take a look at that and we build those models. The one thing I will say about programmatic and bidding and modeling, the more data, the better. So when you're thinking about potentially working with a DSP programmatic partner, really think about opening up the idea of sharing data with them, because the more data that you can share, and to be specific about that, I'm talking about maybe non-attributed installs or passing suppression lists or things that can really inform the model quicker, because as we'll talk later in the panel, testing new partners can be painful, and so you want to move through that learning phase as fast as you possibly can. And so providing that data and making sure that your partner has a safe way to interact with that data, then that's going to benefit you in the long run, because you're not going to be in a very long runway to success. So machine learning, yes, post-back data, segments we'll work with, and obviously creating those audience profiles. So when we think at Aarki about data informing creative, it is a really it's a strong intersection between those data points and actually what creative to deliver to that user. So we have those segments, we have audience profiles, we're ingesting postbacks, but then we're also making a decision on what ad to serve. So once we characterize that impression, because that impression is a device, we can take all the data that we've learned and ingested, and then we can deliver the right ad. And that right ad can be very granular. When we think about A/B testing, we're not thinking about changing a broad scope sometimes of ad. We're thinking about actually what's the color of the call to action button, because believe it or not, that matters, and that's something that we've really fine-tuned here at Aarki to really identify those elements of the ad that will drive the best performance. So when we at Aarki think about starting a campaign, so if you're a UA manager in the room and you're thinking about expanding off of some major platforms and understanding programmatic, we really go through 3 stages. One is the explore phase, and it's a very slow phase. It's a very intentional phase where we're only really looking for 50 installs or 100,000 impressions, because that data will inform the models. What we don't want to do is spend tens of thousands of your dollars right away. That's really not going to help inform our models anyway, because we want to take a slow approach. So we do that in a methodical way, and we do that in what we call the explore segment. Secondly, then we'll start the install optimization, where we're actually looking at, did someone install, and then we'll optimize off of that event. This whole process of left to right, the 3 stages, can actually take 4 weeks. So don't be alarmed if it does take 4 weeks. Work with your partners to understand, how to get through those stages with them. But in that install optimization phase, we're actually now beginning to do what's called dynamic CPM bidding, where before we were doing a fixed bid. We're just like, let's get some installs. Let's understand what that user did. Next stage is we're looking at the actual install. Did they install? We gather that data, we optimize against that. Then we move into, when everyone's happy, into the expand and scale phase, which is really then looking at post-install, which is what everyone cares about. I think the thing with Aarki is that we take this sort of install approach first. You have to be patient with that, because when you look at a DSP, we're looking at upwards of 1 million query impressions per second. It's a lot of inventory to sort of cycle through the modeling. So that's why we go slow. So we want to build that model so that at the third stage, we're actually then looking at the post-install event, of course, any down funnel, registration, purchase, whatever that might be, and then we're on our way. I think the big thing about Aarki, we've seen some ad examples up here. I think the intention of these slides is to show the granularity of it. It's a little bit of an eye chart, but what I want to propose that you try to gain from this is from day 1 to day 30, we're throwing some ads out there. And they could be any type of ad. We're accessing every possible inventory source on programmatic, but we're building upon the learnings. And what that means is we're testing concepts to start. So we're looking at the left-hand side. Does strawberry work better than superfruit? Or does superfruit yellow work better? Honestly, it matters. It's crazy to see that the call to action button, if it's green or blue or red or yellow, actually makes a difference. So when you're working with a partner, we encourage you to take this tactic because, unlike, potentially like a television campaign, these granularities may not work because they're working more on a brand image, and we're really 100% performance. So if red works better than yellow, that's good. As we move through those stages from left to right, explore to scale, we look at identifying champions. So we're always introducing a new ad to see which one works better. So we're never stagnant. We're never just running the same thing and saying, oh, that worked well, let's keep going, because we all know in this marketplace that fatigue is a big issue, right, when we see an ad over and over again. So we move through that pretty quickly. So this is just another example of now we're in day 13 through 20, and we're still identifying champions, and now we're at scale. So measure performance all the way down to the funnel event of your choice. And I think the key thing here is to keep iterating and iterating and iterating. Mobile ads that sit in market for 2 weeks or more are suspect to fatigue, and that's a challenge. At Aarki, we actually provide 100% creative development for all of our customers at no extra charge. We do offer a managed service on programmatic, and all of that creative is included. Thinking about iteration is what I mentioned before. Again, the call to action button is important. I think one thing I want to get to quickly is, so localization is huge. How many in the room actually have an app that is in more regions than one globally? Yeah, super important. So for Aarki specifically, we offer localization in 21 different languages. So to go through all the creative development and iteration and challenging, if you're in the wrong language, it's not going to matter. So you can see on the page what translating into Japanese or Russian versus not in the lift that will provide. So that's just a real quick thing about Aarki. As I mentioned before, it's a little bit different. Quick intro. We're going to have Harry come up and talk about his experience with Aarki, and then we're going to segue right into a quick panel. And that panel will be focused a little bit more on how to choose your media partners in this sort of complex and crowded space.
So basically, we started working with Aarki about a year ago, and really, I just want to talk to you guys, UA manager, TUA managers. I'm not trying to pitch anyone's services or anything like that. I just want to tell you, what we did with them, as if we're talking outside over a coffee, over a donut, over a drink. So that's basically it. Just want to set the groundwork there. As UA managers, we're very lucky that we get to be polygamous. We don't just we don't just work with one person. We work with a couple, or a few, or several. And it's not just Facebook and Google. There's plenty out there. So the percent of your portfolio might change depending on your app or your category. But generally, outside of the big two, you do work with other people. It's true. And sometimes you want to add a bit to your portfolio. And what you do, you start sourcing different vendors out there, different ad networks, different DSPs. So you put together your profile. So this is us. We're WSOP. We're 6 years old. We live in Montreal. We're the #1 poker app in a lot of different markets, arguably in the world. We're looking for something serious, no random hookups. We're looking for partners, and we're looking for good ones, right? So we put ourselves out there. And then what happens? I think UA managers could they know what the answer is. Boom, we're flooded. everybody slides into our DMs. We have messages everywhere, like requests to talk, all these active conversations going. So it really gets overwhelming pretty quickly. So you have to be very thorough or very careful with who you're speaking to, because your time is very valuable. So you don't want to invest too much of it into all these different vendors. So you really have to choose who you might want to work with. So you have to be very careful with that. So there's a lot of options also, and like Kim said, Aarki, their approach is taking things slow, and there's a couple of different ways to onboard new vendors and new partners. One of them is taking it slow. One of them is moving quickly. And at Playtika, at WSOP, we like to take things slow. So during that exploratory phase that Kim mentioned, it took about 4 weeks for us to get to ramp up to 50 installs and 100,000 impressions, which is basically not much at all. But we really took our time through that phase, the exploratory phase. So in any new relationship, you want to get to know each other, explain what our goals are, explain what we like, what we don't like. So it took some time to get there. From there, we moved into the install optimization phase. So this is like the honeymoon period. This took about 3 months. No one could do anything wrong. Everyone's happy. They're generating installs. They look great. They actually delivered installs at over 20% lower cost than our goal, which was amazing. We're very happy about that. So after a 12-week period, we're comfortable moving into a very serious phase, which was the engagement phase, engagement optimization. We didn't get down on one knee, but we're very happy to move into the next phase because we're optimizing for engagement, for engagement events. And they were actually able to beat our goal once we moved into this phase, as well as our ROAS goal. And I'll show you a couple of graphs right now looking at that. So, and this first graph, you can see the blue line. In the blue section, that's the install optimization phase. The red dotted line is our goal, our level achieved goal. So you could see that during the install phase, Aarki was actually delivering traffic that was below that line. So the CPIs were amazing, so we're still pretty happy with what they're generating for us, but they weren't necessarily meeting our level achieved goals or our engagement goals. When we switched to the engagement phase, then you could see that we started beating that goal. So we've been running since then because the traffic looked good. And it's not just the engagement, but with engagement comes ROI also, ROAS. So during the install optimization phase, their ROI looked pretty strong because the CPIs were so cheap. And then during the engagement optimization phase, you could see it spiked, and just general on average was beating the install optimization phase as well. So yeah, very good results from our campaigns. And from there, Kim mentioned it before, creative iteration. So essentially, any new partner we work with, we send a package of assets, things that work well, different things in our game. So Aarki was really great also because they were pretty proactive in going onto our fan page, looking at different ad tools, ad intelligence tools for our game, for competitors, stuff like that, to look at what's going on. So that was one thing that they did. From there, they create storyboards. They send ideas to us, say, hey, this is what we're thinking about. This is what we're working on. What do you guys think? Since we're the actual poker game, we could say, hey, actually, this would make more sense here because certain logic in a poker game. So that's been very cool. From there, we go to character-driven creative. So essentially, just animated banners where we have some of our most important elements in the ads. So cards, chips, Monica, our dealer, call to action, strong call to actions, things like that. Moving on to feature-driven creative, which is pretty unique. So essentially, in our game, we have a meta game essentially where you could rank up to different clubs. So Aarki, we want to put this into an ad as well to kind of talk to some different types of users. So Aarki was able to integrate this into an ad unit as well. Moving on quickly, A/B testing. Everybody does it. We talked about how important it is. The cliche line, always be testing. Everybody does. So yeah, creative iterations. I'm not going to ask you what you think which ad want. With those learnings, what we do is that we take it and we test it against other types of concepts, other types of elements inside of ads. So here you can see, we kept the same perspective, but we added Eric, one of our new dealers, and we added the WSOP bracelet. So we're always testing different stuff to try to, not replicate the success, but beat the best ad essentially. So that's a bit about what we've been doing with Aarki. And again, I'm not trying to toot anybody's horn. It was just what we've been doing. So if we were having a conversation outside, I'd be saying the same thing. So
Yeah, so my name's Cameron. I'm in charge of UA at Clipwire Games. We're a small games studio in the social casino space, and we've been experiencing some rapid growth, mostly from focusing on user acquisition.
I'm David. I'm the CMO of Superdraft. We're a daily fantasy sports company. I also run a large gaming company in Africa as well.
Cool. Heavy hitters, as Jeet said. So, great panel. So, how do you guys think about Facebook, Google, maybe Snapchat today? Many of you have been in this space for a long time. How do you project it? Let's go down the track 2 years. What do you think it's going to look like?
I don't know that they're
Different, the same?
Sure, I'll start. So basically, I think Google, so obviously they took away a lot of our ability to manipulate our campaigns. They took away search campaigns, display campaigns, and YouTube and threw it into UAC. Now they're giving us back a little bit more control. So they introduced ad groups recently for us and for others as well, I'm sure. So that's giving us more control. We're able to have different creatives in those types of ad groups. You still can't manipulate the bids or budgets or anything like that, but at least you could have different themes of creatives targeting different types of people. So I think that's really, really big. So I think they're giving some control back. Facebook, I feel like, is the opposite. George earlier was talking about CBO and automatic placements and things like that. So I think they're really trying to take that kind of Google model and say, hey, stop working so hard. Just have broad audiences, broad targeting. Tell us what your budget is, and we'll take care of all the optimization for you. So I feel like they're kind of going in a bit different directions. Because Google was so strict so quickly. They're trying to give us the control back a little bit, and Facebook's trying to take it away a little bit.
Any speculation on why Google's doing that?
No, I think their results have been pretty good with UAC. I mean, clients are generally happy, but I think it's just kind of an evolution of the platform and the product. Probably just a lot of demands and from advertisers like us. So.
Right, demands that they wanted more. You want a little more transparency, maybe. Yeah. Cameron, David, anything?
As far as 2 years down the line, I imagine that they're still going to be the biggest names in the space. They have the data to leverage. And with Facebook moving in the direction of taking away control, like they were talking about this morning, it's working for us. It lowers the overhead on our user acquisition team, and the results we're seeing are quite good. So I think if they continue to move that direction and continue to do it well, they're only going to grow. I mean, they're already the largest name in the space, but I imagine they'll continue to get larger.
Go ahead.
I think the thing I'm most excited about is I don't really need an F&P anymore. It increases the margin, and it's really annoying to have to pay like 4 to 5 to 6% of your spend to somebody who's not doing anything. Right. So I'm glad for that with Facebook. As far as Snap goes, I think they got to look out for TikTok, because I don't know if you guys have been getting the pitch deck, but it's going to be big.
TikTok, unless you didn't hear that yet. I'm not sure everyone heard that, but that's interesting. So you're getting that?
Well, no, I mean my users are over the age of 21, so they're not on TikTok, but.
Yeah, our demographic is largely past the TikTok and even Snapchat. We're not focusing there.
So you mentioned overhead, right? In terms of how Facebook is good because it helps your overhead. Not a lot of people have to get involved on your team, and they're making it very automated. So moving into sort of the non-self-attributed networks, which is where Aarki sits and many of our competitors, how do you go about testing those new partners? So I feel like Facebook, Google, Snapchat, maybe TikTok, they're going to be sort of these entities that are self-attributed, but there's all this inventory outside of that. As I mentioned, we're listening to 1 million queries per second, so there is an audience there. How do you approach testing those partners without killing your overhead?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a pretty standard process at this point, and kind of what you outlined in your presentation there is you give a small budget, you let it go through the exploration phase, and then you see what kind of results they present to you. Like track it in your own business intelligence, analyze the return on the ad spend that you're getting, and then you can incrementally increase that budget as long as it's making sense in your overall strategy with like what KPIs you're trying to hit and what the users are provided.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It's not really rocket science. It's start small, make small bets, hedge, don't overlever yourself, and don't be impulsive in the test phase.
Yeah, I think it's super important because if you go really fast, really quickly, you'll get bored of each other fast. Just joking. That's a reference to the PowerPoint
Dating.
before, if you're paying attention. But seriously, if you're going really fast and you're trying to buy a lot of installs and the system isn't optimized yet, then all of a sudden your cost per install is going to be insane. There's no chance it's going to meet your goals, and there's no chance you're going to expand with a partner. So I think the only way that you could expand with someone, and the only way that partners have a chance of growing with you, is to start slow, have them meet and exceed your goals, and then you could scale from there. I think that's the only way to do it.
I mean, I'll say we do spend, like if we're prospecting and we're just mining sources, so say we'll go 20, 30 installs at each source, and we'll go as quickly as possible, fail as quickly as possible to blacklist sources. But that's not something that we generally do because you do burn a lot of cash.
So that's a good point. So what's the threshold of understanding performance when you think about installs? So there is a theory of starting slow, right? But we believe that's not necessarily an indicator of success because it's not enough data. We go slow in order to build the model and then to scale. So to your point, David, I mean, do you judge a partner, and that's kind of one of my next questions, how much budget do you give them? How much runway do you give them to say, thumbs up, thumbs down, you're successful for us?
I mean, it's very relative, right? But, I mean, we try to set, say, 2-week goals, see where we can get in 2 weeks. I mean, at the end of the day, we work in seasonality, so when we add a new partner, it's a partner that we can't test. So speaking like if I'm going to work with somebody as a DSP for NFL, which is a significant thing for us, whoever we turn down, right, we might have missed a season. So we had to be pretty aggressive.
You absolutely have a unique model with sports where it's very start and end from a season's perspective. So that you might have a slightly different approach to maybe a gaming client, which if you can hit that scale, you can skyrocket, right? You can truly do a hockey stick, which is slow, 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 then up. So there might be some nuances between the two of you.
Absolutely, like it's worth the time to build the model. If we can like leverage the data points to find users that are likely to convert, that's the most value for us, and that's the most important thing that we're looking for.
Yeah, and I think just to answer the question, how much runway we'll give a partner. I mean, you can get a good understanding of user behavior in like 100 installs, but we really want like 1,000 installs in a certain geo on a certain platform to get a good understanding of their behavior, to have a pretty good sample size. So that'll be the number I'll throw out there.
Got it. So here's sort of a tricky question a little bit that we get into. How hands-on are you with managing those KPIs in its first stages? So there's these two schools of thought, which is, and I've had clients come to me and say, hey, Kim, here's a budget. I'm going to let you spend that. I'm going to keep my eyes closed. You guys just do it. I'll give you maybe 2-4 weeks, whatever we decide on. And they're sort of put the blinders on. And even if the CPIs are high and the ROAS is terrible, they let us continue. Because we know that the inventory is there, the volume's there, we need to get there with the modeling. And then there's others that are looking at it on a sort of a day-to-day basis. I'm not saying one's right or wrong, but how do you guys approach it?
It's very relative. During the exploration phase, essentially blinders are on because, like I said, you're just building out the model and trying to find what kind of user is going to convert in my product. Once the exploration phase is over, I'm pretty flexible with install cost because the quality of the user is what matters, right? If you charge me $20 for an install, but 50% of those users are converting to purchasers, that's a great campaign for me. If you're charging $20 an install and 5% of the users are converting, that's a bad campaign. So it very much depends on what kind of users you're bringing into my game.
Yep, makes sense. Anything else?
Yeah, I'll make a joke back to my presentation and say that I'm very hands-on.
Yeah.
Just for the initial stages, again, joke back to the presentation. I like working with the person I'm working with, the DSP or the ad network or whoever it is, give them an understanding of what we look for and what we do, and they get a good understanding of that. So I think it's the best way to lead them to success. I try to kind of like hold their hand along the way and get them to a place where training wheels are on, and then get them to a place where they could take the two-wheeler and go by themselves. And then we could speak every so often on a weekly, bi-weekly, monthly call, whatever it is, regular reports coming in. But once they know what we're looking for, what works well for us, they get an understanding of our goals and how to hit them, then we can let them kind of do their own thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for us, it's kind of to hint at what you're getting into. It's also about, like, have I worked with the partner before? Like, how well do I know these partners? What's their reputation? Do I need to overwatch them? Do we think they're shady? But in our position, we're lucky because a lot of quality is really front-loaded for our users, just the nature of a real money gaming product. There's a lot of direct intent, so we can index our funnel and we can have some pretty good signals to determine what the amortization of the life cycle is going to be.
Cool. So let's move quickly into the conversation around creatives. I mentioned it in my quick overview of what Aarki does in very granular creative development, creative optimization, champion challenging, and all that. So I run across customers, and David, you might fall in this camp too, on the right side, but on the left is, I don't have a lot of IP, take every asset I have, build on it fast as you can. So we have those. Then we have more of a protected IP, right? Gaming clients that have a lot of, whether it be HBO or Disney, or you're working with the NFL. So tell me a little bit about how you're choosing partners that provide creative, but how do you work with them and choose them based on, do they offer creative support? Is that a differentiator for you or not?
I mean, I've been on both sides of it. I mean, last year, Star Trek, Game of Thrones, Walking Dead was my games. So I've been on that side of it. That's a little more restrictive because now I have to get CBS's opinion on everything that you make, and there's a whole thing. No, we make our own creative. We have an external agency that's more of a bandwidth factory for us, but the ideation comes from us. I find, I don't want this to be an indictment of the partners, but largely everything that's produced is templated, right? I can almost tell what's made by AppLovin because it's like, here's a thing, here's some copy, and it just changed. And so it's not a huge differentiator for me. We definitely want to be able to stand on our own feet creatively. And that's a huge differentiator for us against our competitors. We're way, way, way better at it.
Good. No.
Yeah, like we have a pretty large library of creatives just from running, Facebook and Google ads ourselves. So we usually provide those to our partners and say which creatives generally perform best for us. And then it's pretty relative on the partner. Some want to take static assets and create their own ads, and some just run with the video that we've provided. So it's very relative, yeah.
So it's relative to the partner you're working
Relative
with.
to the
So the partner
partner,
might
yeah.
offer that solution, and they might not, and you're okay sort of either
Like
way.
I want to give the partner the best chance to perform.
Yep.
So if they say, this is what I want and this is what we usually work with, that's what I'm going to try to give to them.
Got it.
I think it's a huge value add. I mean, in our studio we have a couple of video artists. We have 2D artists working on the game. Also, we have video for for UA, but they also work on products sometimes. So having another source of creative is huge. We could test them in across the campaigns. Running with you guys specifically, or if you're talking about AppLovin or whoever else. It's I think it's really big to have fresh creatives coming in, testing against heroes, and if they could outseed them or win those tests and those battles, then you're essentially getting players at better prices or getting more volume. So no, I think it's huge. I think it's a really big value add.
So it sounds like it's relevant, and I appreciate that, depending on the customer. And I run across that too. I mean, customers that are very, very strict with their IP, it's difficult to iterate quickly on that. And we understand that. So let me ask a different question, going in a slightly different direction. A few minutes left. So you have so many options in front of you. You have search, you have programmatic, you have self-attributed networks, I keep calling with Facebook and Google. How do you structure your teams for best success when you have all of these vendors, coming at you? Just to clarify, I have some customers that, some of you have multiple titles, some of you don't, but they have a UA manager for a title, inclusive of all partners, or they structure their team, multiple titles all fall under search, et cetera. So how do you guys go about that?
I mean, I've seen it both ways. A gaming studio, it's like, okay, this is the Facebook team across all products, or the invert, just knowing it. I think I won't speak to how we're doing it now, but at Disruptor Beam, we were very cognizant that our games had required a deep IP knowledge. Like the Star Trek guys needed to know Star Trek, and anybody can do UAC in Facebook, and if they're just know how to use Excel and know numbers. So, yeah.
We're a relatively small studio, so our user acquisition team covers all networks and all product.
Yep, fair enough, makes sense.
Yeah, for us in Montreal, we only work on the World Series of Poker, and our team works really closely together. We all have our different networks and sources, but we're always looking at performance kind of uniformly. So we don't have a minimum spend per channel, whether it's search or display or social, where we're seeing good results.
You spend the money.
That's where we'll put the next marketing dollar.
Yep. Typical of good performance marketers. That makes sense.
We also, I'll add, like, it's scale. I mean, I look at our UA managers. They're also responsible for deploying capital. I mean, there's a certain point to where you're a marketer. There's a certain point to where you're an asset manager. So you have your responsibilities, but tell me how I could spend the next $500,000 a month.
Cool. All right. We're about to close it out, 40 seconds. Any questions from the group? This is a really good panel, seasoned UA managers on all fronts.
So my question is, seeing the saturation in Facebook and Google, do you think we can leverage LinkedIn as a platform with regards to ads? For B2B business, I would say.
Oh, B2B, yeah. I mean, I don't know B2B at all. We're solely B2C in direct response, so can't really answer that.
I've messed around with LinkedIn, but I mean, the targeting is like your targeting levers are just not remotely the same. So I would doubt the scalability of it. I would not call myself an expert on it, but I can anecdotally tell you that the people that are buying LinkedIn media are not the same people you're going to find on these stages.
How is it when you're working with big IPs? I mean, David touched a little bit on Star Trek, because I know usually the cycle is so you have to get to the brand has to go to you. Like, how does it work with if you?
Yeah, we are about to launch a couple with significant IP, and so there's this balance of they're anxious to go, right? They want to test, but they also want us to iterate and do the process that I explained. So we kind of meet them in the middle. So if their IP approval takes 2 to 4 weeks, which it does, we'll start to build, and we'll deliver it to, the studio in Hollywood to approve it. But at the short term, we'll launch without it, and so that we'll do the very best that we can with the assets that they have. But as soon as those ads that are IP inclusive are approved, then we'll introduce those. So we've worked with many studios or developers that have pretty strong IP, and we sort of meet them in the middle. The good news is when it starts to work, then they move faster.
Any final thoughts? One thought from each of you on choosing, what is the most important thing choosing a media buying partner?
I'll say this. I'm just going to plug. We have a $125,000 week one contest. Download Superdraft, win my money. That's the most important thought.
Just are they known in the space? Do they have experience with similar products? What's your competition using? Like that's usually the first things that I'm looking at when I'm evaluating partners.
Apart from your dating analogy, which was spectacular.
Thank you. And that may or may not have been my Tinder profile. There's a lot of people in Toronto. What do you want me to say? Yeah, I think it's unique inventory. So unique inventory is huge. Kim, you're talking about Snapchat before. That's unique inventory. You're talking about TikTok. That's unique inventory. So I think anywhere you can find unique inventory, it's huge. So yeah, that's my thought.
Awesome. That was my last question too. Thank you. So we're good, I think.